Okay then, thank you very much everyone for inviting me here this evening on behalf of the Archaeology Service to come and give this talk. It's lovely to be here and I do hope everyone is kind of safe and well in their homes on Zoom. As you heard, I'm the Assistant Archaeology Officer at East Lothian Council, and I hope this talk will go smoothly and the technology will go smoothly, but if there are any tech problems, I am apologising in advance, so keep our fingers crossed. Just a quick bit of background to the talk. When we were asked to give a talk on East Lothian archaeology, I wasn't sure quite what to focus on. I'm sure you're aware we have a county that is highly rich in heritage from the prehistoric period right up until the present day. But of course, it's also been a bit of a strange couple of years. Strange is still ongoing, and so we haven't had quite the amount of fieldwork or kind of discoveries and sites and things coming through the door that we might normally have, although we have got quite a lot of things going on at the moment and things coming up in the pipeline. However, I did find inspiration when I considered that this year, 2022, is the 20th anniversary of the East Lothian Council Archaeology Service. How about that? And in fact, the service started when I was in, I think, my first or maybe second year at university. So that's quite a thing for me to get my head around. So I decided to give a talk that included a little bit about the Archaeology Service and what we do, in case people aren't familiar. And then I thought I'd give a kind of overview or sort of whistle-stop tour of some of the headline discoveries that we've had over the last 20 years in East Lothian and that the Archaeology Service has been involved with. So that's where the kind of title 20 Years of Discovery at the Trial's Edge comes from. So, moving too quickly there. Okay, so the Archaeology Service at the Council, what do we do? We're part of the planning department at the Council, and as I mentioned in the introduction, we've been going since 2002, and we cover both East and Mid Lothian Council areas. We do have a pretty wide remit, but our sort of main roles are to provide advice and recommendations to the planning services in relation to potential impacts on heritage from planning. We also manage and update the historic environment record for East and Mid Lothian. We also give, again, a lot of advice to other council departments on managing council-owned heritage assets or kind of heritage sites that are on council-owned land. So two well-known examples I'm sure you'll have heard of are North Berwick Law and Trepain Law. Again, providing advice to lots of other people as well, individuals, organisations, professional groups as well. So yeah, basically lots of advice. And finally, we do also have a remit for some public engagement and outreach as well. So just have a quick look at a couple of these things. So the HER, so I kind of got a screen grab here. This is this map up here with all these dots on and things. That's the HER, the historic environment record. That's what we see on our screens when we're working. It's basically a massive database linked to a map, and it contains all the known historic environment records or sites in East and Mid Lothian, and it also contains records of all the archaeological events that have happened in those counties as well. So things like excavations or a field survey or building recording. It's really important to the work we do, all that advice I was talking about. It's kind of the main tool that we use to help provide that kind of advice and recommendations. And currently, the HER contains over 60,000 records, and it's still growing. And just in case, if you weren't aware, you can access the HER online at the John Gray Centre, and the website's just there on your screen. I've just put a couple of other screen grabs up here as well. What you can see now are two different images from the HER, but they're both of Musselburgh, hooray! And they're just zoomed in at different scales. So you can see it's very busy in Musselburgh. You can also see that the map is covered in lots of different coloured dots and shapes, and these basically represent different map lays or different types of information. For example, the green dots and shapes are kind of sites and monuments, and the kind of blue, the nice bright blue areas and lines that you can see are the archaeological events that I was talking about. And we also hold data that we get from Historic Environment Scotland as well. So that's things like your scheduled monuments and the battlefields and the listed buildings. And each of those dots and shapes on the map links to a record in the database. So that's kind of what you can see an example of here. And you know, those records can be about a site, they'll be about an archaeological event, so all the kind of information that we have about those things. And we also have records for the source material as well, so when people write a report on the work that they've done. What's really helpful for us is that we can link all of these records together, but of course we can update existing records. So if we find out some new information about a site, we can add some more information to the record. And of course we can create new ones, so when new things are found, which I'm sure, hopefully throughout this talk, you will see that that's what's been happening over the last 20 years. And just a quick nod to the two kind of main kind of public engagement things that we do every year. I'm sure you're all aware of these, but just as a reminder, because they are coming up again for 2022. We have the East Lothian Archaeology and Local History Fortnight, and that was kind of now been changed to the East Lothian Archaeology and Heritage Fortnight. That runs for the first 2 weeks in September every year. And in 2021, it was good. We managed a mix of online and in-person events, and that seemed to work quite well. Obviously, all the kind of things online has been a steep learning curve for everyone, but we are keeping our fingers crossed for this year that we'll be able to have even more in-person events. And our other annual event, which takes place in November, is the Edinburgh Lothians and Borders Archaeology Conference, and we run that in conjunction with our colleagues in the Edinburgh and Scottish Borders Archaeology Services. This is the largest, I think it's the largest local annual archaeology conference, and it will be the 20th anniversary of the conference this year as well. So that's another thing to celebrate. So after that kind of bit of explanation about some of the things that we actually do at the Archaeology Service, I'm now going to sort of start us on our journey looking at some of the wonderful sites that have been discovered in East Lothian over the last 20 years. These have almost all been identified as a result of development. So that's the other aspect of our job that I was talking about before, work that's planning related essentially. So these sites have all been identified through basically starting with a trial trench evaluation, which has then identified something, and then that's led to an excavation afterwards. So this is kind of, these sites are quite a good example of how this kind of process works. So here we go. Right, so this, starting literally at the beginning, Dunbar Quarry. You can see on your screen there, this is the map, the pink shape on the map basically shows the location of this site that I'm going to talk about, a Mesolithic house. So it's kind of nearby, just down from Barnes Ness and Catcraig. This site was identified in 2002 following an evaluation and geophysical survey, and these were undertaken before the quarry at East Barnes was going to be extended. And this, the illustration on the right of the screen there with the big red arrow, that's some data from the geophysical survey, and the arrow is pointing at a dark circular blob, and that's what's known as a geophysical anomaly, which in this case did actually turn out to be archaeological in origin. Oh, no, gone too fast. What's happening? So this, sorry about that. So this next slide, you've got a couple of photographs here. So AOC Archaeology, who undertook the excavations, basically found a natural hollow, which you can see on the left-hand image there. You can see that dip in the ground. And this was a natural hollow that had been modified and then had a ring of posts placed around it. And that basically created the remains of a circular post-built structure, approximately 6.5 meters in diameter. So that's what the archaeologists found once they'd removed the kind of layers above. In that image on the right hand side of the screen, you can see that circular ring of posts there. And you can sort of see the hollow and the dip in the ground quite well. There was some other pits and kind of lithic scatters, so work stone scatters found outside this structure, but from within the structure, over 25,000 work stone pieces were found, which is an incredible amount given the size of the structure that I just mentioned. These kind of work stone, these lithics included microliths, scrapers, bladelets, burins, all kinds of things, and also lots of all the bits that that we call debitage, the waste material from working this stone as well. Material from the structure was radiocarbon dated to 10,200 BC, which puts it firmly in the Mesolithic period, so that's before farming. And it's quite an unusual find. It's rare to find Mesolithic structures like this, although more examples have been found in Scotland now and in the UK. I particularly like this site because on my very first student excavation, also in 2002, I got to excavate a Mesolithic roundhouse in Northumberland. So I think that's really quite a nice link. And hopefully this kind of illustration here, this is a reconstruction drawing, gives you a little bit of an indication of what the Mesolithic structure may have looked like and some of the activities going on around it. So now we're going to move a little bit westwards, a bit along the A1. So basically this is work that was undertaken during the A1 upgrade. And again, evaluations were undertaken and 11 main sites were identified and excavated by Guard Archaeology between Harrington and Dunbar, and between sort of 2001 and 2004. So you should be able to see, hopefully, the approximate locations of these 11 sites along the A1 there. And the sites ranged in date from the Neolithic, so approximately 5000 BC, up until the medieval period, around 1400 AD. And they include both settlement evidence and burial features, and also the classic archaeological ritual sites. And I think for such a relatively narrow strip of land, really, this does showcase how intensively East Lothian has been occupied and used through time for all different kinds of things. So hopefully you'll be able to see in this slide, these are just some examples of some of the sites that these 11 main sites that were excavated. I've got, there's 3 different ones up here. The one in the middle with all the stones, the big, what looks like a big stony spread. This is the remains of an Iron Age settlement at Fantasy, which was basically a large platform with a big stone revetment along one edge and what would have been a wooden a palisade. And it had a sort of principal sub-rectangular building with some smaller buildings around it on this platform. But this was then later replaced by a large subcircular structure, so a different shaped building. And this also had substantial areas of paving and post holes associated with it. But when this second structure was built, they were still using the earlier palisade, but they also added even more little structures around it. So it seems like it was getting even busier and more activity was going on there. There was also a cobbled surface and a large midden area. And they found lots of artifacts, loads of metal objects, brooches, pins, bracelets, bits of glass bangles, spindle wheels, I mean, all kinds of things. And also some Samenware pottery dating to the 2nd century AD. The two images that look quite waterlogged or a little bit muddy and waterlogged, you've got some remains of pits and ditches and stake holes and post holes. You can hopefully see in the farthest image on your left a kind of ditch that's got post or stake holes actually in it as well. There were some large pits found, some of which had stone linings, and some of these large pits contained Neolithic grooved ware pottery and lithics. And the radiocarbon dates that came back from this site also suggest that it's a Neolithic to early Bronze Age date for these features. I think it's some kind of settlement site, which again is really cool. We don't necessarily in the Neolithic have lots of settlement remains. We have more kind of funerary monument remains or ritual features in the landscape. So it's really great to get some potential settlement evidence as well. And the final image on the right-hand side, you can see another pit that's got some stone lining to it. This is actually a stone-lined kist, but this is actually a bit later in date. This is Iron Age, and this was found at Pencraig Hill. But in the background of that photograph, you should maybe be able to see what looks like a ditch or a linear feature. So this is actually part of what they think, the excavators think is a Neolithic mortuary enclosure. So you've got an Iron Age burial and a much earlier Neolithic mortuary enclosure. And the ditch actually formed essentially kind of like a trapezoidal shape, or it enclosed a trapezoidal area of land. And within that sort of trapezoidal area of land, they found a scooped out feature in the interior, and they also found the remains of possibly some kind of wooden platform, which they think was a mortuary structure, a mortuary platform, which had then later been burnt, maybe as a pyre, and then possibly covered with soil to form a kind of a long barrow, a burial. These sites are all quite different, and obviously there's lots of different things going on. And I think that they have really given us some brilliant evidence for kind of settlement and life happening in the past in East Lothian, and they've made for some great publications. If you are interested in finding out more, I've put them on the screen there, and also exhibitions as well. This illustration just up on the left is kind of trying to give an impression of what that Neolithic mortuary enclosure in sort of as it was being built and created might have looked like. So now we're going to move on. We're moving northwards now, and a bit further on in time as well as in our 20-year Archaeology Service history. So we are now in Archerfield. So again, that kind of pink shape on the map gives you an indication of the location of the site that we're looking at. We're at the lost, deserted medieval settlement of Eldbottle. Eldbottle was the precursor to Dilton, but no one really knew where it was until some remains were identified in 1999. And I think these dated from the 12th to the 15th century AD, so medieval. But in 2006, AUC archaeology found more remains of the village further to the south, which is what we're talking about just now. And this was in advance of the creation of the golf course there. So while some of the features that they found were able to be left in situ, 8 buildings were actually excavated, as well as some associated enclosures and field boundaries. And you can see those up on an image, a sort of overhead aerial image of some of those buildings, those stone-built structures on the right-hand side of your screen. Some of those walls survived to about 1 metre high. And there was also evidence within the buildings of occupation deposits, internal divisions, and flagged floors. These buildings dated from the 15th to the 18th century, so a little bit later than the ones that had already been found. And that sort of shows that the village was essentially shifting and moving, and as it was being rebuilt. You can also see from that photograph, I hope, that there's a lot of sand. And it seems that the village here suffered from sand inundation from at least 2, if not maybe 3 storms. And that contributed to the village essentially being abandoned before it was finally left and everyone moved to Dirleton. I'm not sure if those storms had names, but it would seem that Storm Arwen and friends are not entirely new phenomenon at all. There was lots of interest in the site, as you can see from that photograph on the left. There was a weekend of site tours given during the archaeology fortnight, and that event still holds some of our highest attendance figures, which isn't surprising really, given how rare these kind of deserted medieval settlement sites are, especially excavated ones in Scotland. Oh, excuse me. Right, moving on. So hopefully you'll recognise this map, this location. We're in Musselburgh, hooray! Specifically in Varesk. And I'm sure you know that Musselburgh is very rich in archaeological remains. This includes the Lewis Vale Roman altars, which were excavated in 2010 by AOC Archaeology during the site clearance of the old cricket pavilion in Lewis Vale Park. The sort of pink dot on the right hand side of the map, that's the location of where the altars were found. Okay, so this image in the middle is a really great overhead shot, which hopefully you can see the 2 altars there. That's in situ before they've been lifted. So you can see that they're lying flat, and the excavators think that they were deliberately laid flat, that not that they were pushed over, but they were actually carefully laid flat and placed that way before the site fell out of use. These two, the 2 photographs on either side actually show the altars once they'd been carefully lifted, and they're going back to get examined and analysed further. And you can see the one on the left, this is the altar dedicated to Sol, so the sun god, and the one on the right, this one is for Mithras, or the cult of Mithras. And that the cult of Mithras in particular is associated with the Roman army, which is very interesting given that you've got Inveresk Roman fort very close by to where these altars were found. And actually these altars were dedicated by a centurion, Gaius Cassius Flavius. So we've actually got a name of the person who dedicated these altars, which I think is amazing. Analysis of the altars suggests that they are made from local stone and that they were carved by local craftsmen as well. Also that there is evidence for pigment on both of the altars. So they quite likely were highly painted actually, so you wouldn't see just the stone carving as we see today. You can also see from the image of the Sol altar that it's got recesses or carving around the head, and this would have allowed light to shine through from a lamp behind. And here we've got some images of the laser scanning that AOC undertook. I've just got the Sol altar up here, but the laser scanning has produced these amazing 3D images of the altars, and it really brings out the detail and the texture of the altars very, very clearly to the naked eye. Based on the excavation, it does seem that the altars were lying within a structure within a Mithraeum. So the Mithraeum was the underground temple that was created for the cult of Mithras, and the altars would be housed in the temple. So if that is the case, and that's what was thought during the excavation, that would make these altars the most northerly examples found in situ within a Mithraeum. So yeah, amazing stuff for Musselburgh. And another great site in Musselburgh, the primary care centre. So you're, again, just looking at the map, you can see the kind of boxy pink outline on the left of the screen. That's the location of this site. This was excavated in 2010 by CFA Archaeology prior to the construction of the primary care centre in Musselburgh. It's a multi-period site comprising, I think, 8 phases, ranging from the Mesolithic up until the Roman and late Iron Age, and actually maybe even a little bit later. It's a really remarkable site, actually, and it's also one that's quite close to my heart, as I actually worked on the excavation when I was a commercial field archaeologist. So yeah, it was a really amazing site to get to work on. So the main features, the main elements of this site comprised a kind of river or water-laid deposit, which contained huge amounts of Mesolithic and possibly Neolithic flints. And so the image on the top right of your screen there, that looks a bit like a funny sort of chessboard or grid, that's the area of this kind of water-laid deposit with all the flints in. And it probably looks a bit strange, but it's just to show you the kind of excavation methodology that was employed to excavate this deposit and recover the flints and work out where the biggest concentrations were across the spread of soil, as well as down through it as well. A fire pit was also found here too, which suggests that perhaps this area was maybe a camp during that time, and it was possibly next to kind of marshy or waterlogged ground anyway, which allowed these flints to kind of just sit in the soil and kind of be held in place where they were, not move around too much. There was also, moving much further on in time now, there were also 4 Iron Age burial pits which contained 6 inhumations, 6 people between them. So 2 of these pits had 2 people in each. And there was also 6 Roman burials. I think the Roman burials were generally younger males, and 4 showed evidence for decapitation, which happened post-mortem, and their heads were placed in a variety of positions, actually. So this photograph up on the top left, you should be able to see the skeleton there, and the individual's head has actually been placed between their legs. They may be contemporary with the nearby fort at Inveresk, 2nd century AD fort. And if so, there would be some of the earliest such burials, these kind of decapitation burials in Britain. The central image there with all the cobbles in, this is the rubble base of a Roman rampart, some kind of military structure. You can also see in the foreground of that picture, there is kind of a stripe of soil that's actually the remains of a ditch cutting through this rubble base. And the ditch actually formed part of a network of ditches, basically a field system. And this this field system is thought to be Roman, and it's thought to have been associated with the fort, which might make this kind of rubble base feature maybe slightly earlier. And all of these amazing different bits of archaeology were overlain by a really thick midden deposit, which contained lots of pottery and animal bone. And I think that this deposit and all these finds actually probably derive from the fort just up the hill, the Inveresk fort, and they may relate to when the fort was abandoned. But interestingly, some of the pottery, some of the seaming-ware that was recovered from this midden deposit was found to have got names of some of the soldiers scratched into it. So a bit like the altars, with Gaius Cassius Flavius, we've got quite a personal and tangible link to the Roman soldiers that were living here in Musselburgh. So now we are moving back across the coast again, and we're moving back up towards East Barnes area again, not too far from where we found our Mesolithic house, but this site is much later in time, but it's also associated with the quarry extension again. So we've got a wonderful Iron Age site here, which was excavated at East Barnes in 2016 by AOC Archaeology. And I hadn't long started at the Archaeology Service, and I got to go out on a site visit with my colleague Andrew, who I'm sure a lot of you know, to go and see this site. And it was a beautiful sunny day, and I thought, what a great job I've got now, going out to see some really interesting archaeology. What was actually found were 6 separate stone-built houses. This image on the right, it's maybe, you can't see it's not very clear, so you can't see all these different 6 houses very clearly, but you basically had lots of stone everywhere, which basically gradually resolved itself into different houses and revetment walls and other connecting walls and areas of courtyards and stone flagging. And so that was kind of a main area of stone, basically, that was gradually excavated and unpicked. And then a bit to the northeast, they also found a sort of a separate area of another possible structure, which is this image in the bottom left of your screen, looking out towards the lighthouse. And this was an area that had several phases of flooring or stone flagging, and actually in the bottom sort of left corner of that stone area, you can actually see some of that stone flooring and flagging there. They did find lots of stone artifacts, things like hammerstones, rotary querns, stone bowls, and also pieces of tomb molds as well. 4 of the structures, so 4 of the 6 structures that were identified had actually been rebuilt. And so you'd got later buildings placed on top of the earlier ones. And so the image on the right there, you can probably see now a bit more clearly. You've got some kind of circular stone built features or structures coming up. And the image on your left is of one of these stone built structures that had been rebuilt. Again, I think this is actually one of the later phases. And this one, I think, had got 2 phases of stone structure, and then underneath both of those there was an earlier ring roof structure, so that probably would have been something that was more based around wood built rather than stone built, potentially anyway. So the finds I mentioned before suggest a preliminary Iron Age date, so there's not been any radiocarbon dating or anything undertaken as yet, but the finds suggest an Iron Age date. And the site has been sort of interpreted, because of the types of finds, the stone objects that were found, the site has been interpreted as a sort of small industrial site or a workshop site, so like a little Iron Age industrial park. at East Barnes. Also, interestingly, the architecture of the structures is similar to some other contemporary sites found at Broxmouth Hill Fort and also in Walliford, and also some in the Scottish borders too. So it's possible that we might be seeing evidence for a kind of more distinctive kind of regional building style during this period. So getting on to some of our, I think the last couple of showstopper sort of sites. So we're at East Linton now, and at sites called Orchard Field 1 and 2, so just outside East Linton. And these were two sites excavated in 2011 and 2019 by CFA Archaeology, both in advance of housing. So that map there, the purple arrows pointing to the location, the sort of blue sort of rectangular shape outline on the right, that's the 2011 site, and the one on the left just below the arrow, that's the 2019 site. So 2011, one of the main things really that was found was some prehistoric burials or barrows, and the 2019 site, the main thing that was found was an extensive pit alignment. So if you sort of cast your mind back just to those sites that I was talking about from the A1, including the Neolithic mortuary enclosure, you'll maybe recognise that the Orchard Field sites and some of those sites were actually located in quite a similar area. So the mortuary enclosure is located just at the bottom left corner of this map, and you can see here there's quite a few shapes shown on the map. We've got Pencraig standing stone, and we've got a Neolithic cursus monument, and we've got these prehistoric burials, and we've got a Neolithic mortuary enclosure, amongst many other things. And it seems like now that maybe Orchard Field, along with all these other sites, kind of maybe starting to show that we actually do have a ritual, wider ritual prehistoric landscape here. Archaeologists always use that word ritual when they don't really know what they mean, but actually in this case we think we probably can say that it was an important location in the landscape, and it's been demarcated through time with these big linear monuments like the cursus, and with standing stones and mortuary enclosures and burials. So all these kind of activities going on through time in this particular location in East Lothian. So if we take a look at these barrows then, these burials, so this image here on the right, this photograph, this shows what they actually look like when they'd finished being excavated. So what we're talking about here is again, it's holes and things in the ground. There's no upstanding features left anymore. But what you've got is 3 circular ditches. I think they're somewhere between 5 and 8 meters across, so they're not huge. And 2 of them of these circular ditches had posts around them as well, which I think you should be able to see in the photograph. And one of these ditches in the enclosed space in the middle did contain a pit which had cremation burial in it. So I think that's the 3rd pit, the furthest one away. You can maybe just see a small depression there, which I think is the pit. But also cremation remains of cremated people were found in the ditches themselves, which suggests they were later insertions, possibly even in the material that was used to backfill these ring ditches. And as I said, these basically represent the ploughed down remains of what would have been upstanding features, barrows essentially, where basically a burial would be placed in the middle and then a ditch dug around, and the upcast used to create a mound on top. And the post holes suggest that these barrows also would have had upright posts around them too, which would obviously have marked out these features even more. A pyre pit, so basically a big fire, an area for having big fire, was found to the north of these barrows. And this suggests that the cremation process may have actually taken place on site. So we do find cremation burials, prehistoric cremation burials, but we don't always know where they were actually cremating the individuals before they buried them. So this is also really interesting, that we think this activity might have actually been happening on site or very close by. Radiocarbon dating from these barrows places them in the Bronze Age, which is quite typical, at around 12,000 BC. And what we often get in the Bronze Age, we do find quite a lot of cremation burials, either in pits or in urns, but we don't often find them associated with barrows, certainly not in this area. So it's a really great find. And our second site is a pit alignment of 49 separate pits, forming an L shape. If you should be able to see that in the image on the left is the pit alignment, and the image on the right is the kind of survey plan, again showing all these pits. And it's about 130 meters in length down one side. The pits appear to have been deliberately backfilled, so they've not been left open to kind of naturally infill. They've actually been deliberately closed off. But from the excavated evidence, it's not clear if they ever held anything in them, like a post, for example, or a stone upright. And actually, we don't often find evidence for that at a lot of excavated examples of pit alignments anyway. It is just kind of pits with soil in. Few finds were recovered from this site, but a fragment of shale was found, which preliminary analysis suggests is possibly like a rough out for a bangle that wasn't actually finished. But as is often the case with pit alignments, dating is difficult and tentative, but this find suggests that the alignment may date to the Iron Age. Some pit alignments people think are Neolithic, some could be in between Bronze Age. Some now are being dated to the Iron Age as well. So these aren't necessarily a phenomenon that are just associated with one period in particular. Again, similarly, the function of pit alignments is also debated, but they are clearly there to demarcate the land in some way, and on, almost like a landscape scale, really, they can be very extensive. And of course, what we're seeing, as with other sites that are found during development or in advance of development, we're seeing, bits of the puzzle. We're seeing some pieces, but not all of the pieces. So, some of this pit alignment could have been far more extensive when it was originally created. But as I said, they're obviously there to demarcate the land in some way. And, in this particular area, as I mentioned before, we've got the barrows, we have the cursus, we've got other burial sites, and we've got mortuary enclosures and things like that. So this area was definitely important. So they're the kind of some of the main sites that I thought I might be able to fit in to this presentation, ranging from 2002 to 2019, basically. But I just thought I would just briefly touch on a couple of our current projects that we're doing for the council in relation to council projects. Just to also sort of hint at some of the other work that we do, the other advice that we give to council departments. So one of our projects is Preston Grange Museum, one that we're involved with. This is a multi-million-pound redevelopment of the museum, essentially, and it's been in the pipeline for a number of years. And the aim is to revitalise the museum and enhance the heritage and access to this really important industrial heritage site. And we are acting as advisors to help retain the historic character of the site, and also to provide that kind of technical advice for recording and interpretation. The project is in its first phase, which is basically the trains are coming out of the bathhouse where they've been stored for a very long time, to allow work on the bathhouse structure, which will hopefully make that more accessible. But also a pug shed is being recreated to house the trains in. So that will hopefully allow access to the trains as well. And a second project that we're involved with is at Preston Tower in Preston Pans. So this is works basically to consolidate and stabilise this amazing tower and the ducat there. And yeah, again, to sort of facilitate access and enhance the surrounding grounds and enhance the interpretation as well. Unfortunately, the ducat has suffered from some vandalism, I think, and so the roof has gotten even more unstable. So the kind of work has sort of been focusing on trying to get that roof stabilised and sorted out as a priority. But there have been some trial investigations of the grounds, which has shown it's been quite disturbed in the past. I think there used to be a market garden there, so that's probably not surprising. There's also been some historic building recording undertaken to help record the structures before kind of conservation and stabilisation work is undertaken there. So, thank you very much for joining me on this whistle-stop tour, this kind of road trip around the Archaeology Service and across the last 20 years of archaeological discovery in East Lothian. I hope I've been able to showcase, well, really the huge variety of archaeological sites in the county and the amazing time depth and variety of activities as well that these sites represent, and also their importance and the contribution that they bring to understanding our heritage in Scotland and actually in the UK more widely. And as I noted, just with those last two projects there, we've obviously still got lots going on at the Archaeology Service. And yeah, if the last 20 years have been anything to go by, there's a lot more to come. So yeah, here's to the next 20, and thank you very much.